Hey there. So I wanted to share some thoughts and insight that I have on hearing loss and being a musician. And the reason why I've had like four conversations with other musicians in the last 3 weeks, with other musicians who are going through a hearing loss situation. For me, I'm going on 2 years now, where one morning I woke up and in my ear was just ringing like cicadas, and my ear felt full, and I thought I had an ear infection. And a couple days later, after the antibiotics didn't work, the ENT tells me, no, you've lost 4,000 hertz and above hearing in your left ear. And you know being a musician, when somebody tells you you've lost your hearing or you've lost part of it, let me tell you, the world just literally falls out from underneath you. And mind you, I'm not a professional musician, or wasn't a professional musician at the time, but music is my bliss, it's my passion. And I was halfway through building this studio here and I have all these dreams and aspirations of what I want to do with music. And so to find out that losing permanently part of my hearing was devastating. And I went through all the stages of grief, the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, all of that stuff. And I did everything I could. I got steroid injections in my ear. If you've ever had that, it's like waterboarding through your ear. It's weird, gross experience, but that didn't work. I saw a shaman. I did shamanic journeying. I did all kinds of stuff, Reiki and whatever I could do to try to heal or reverse it. I tried. And once I came to a point of acceptance, I realized that actually losing part of my hearing has been a gift. And it all is dependent upon my mindset and the way I look at things. But it has taught me a lot of things, not only about my perception, but about music. And that's what I want to share. Because in these conversations I've had with people that are going through it, it's I think has helped give them some hope or give them some insight or some comfort as to what they're going through, because it is a very painful and depressing event. But just to go through and just to tell you what I've learned from it, the first thing is, I realized at a point that I can't be a victim. I'm not a victim. I can't have the victim mentality. I spent a lot of time thinking like, oh, what did I do to deserve this? This isn't fair. I did everything I should do. I protected my hearing. I used earplugs and everything. The doctor just said it's sudden sensorineural hearing loss. It's idiopathic. We don't know the cause. At the time, I was going through a lot of stress. There was a big stressful life change going through, and I think that had a lot to do with it. But for people that I've talked to recently, I think some people have had COVID and have lost hearing during that infection and whatnot. But whatever the case of why it happened or how it happened, that's not. You can't control it. It's an event that happened. And what I realized is, when an event happens, we put a story on it. We put a judgment. We put a label. And if we put a negative judgment or a negative label on something, and we, consider ourselves a victim, then our outlook on it and our experience of it is just totally negative. And we're captive to it. We're enslaved by this this negative thing that's happened. And likewise, when we start worrying about the future, like, man, am I going to be able to enjoy music? My guitar doesn't sound the same anymore. Am I going to be able to maintain the same level of playing as I've had? And am I going to progress anymore? These things are all in the future that don't exist. And in the present moment, I realized that I had the ability to change the story, the ability to change the way that I think and was thinking about what happened and what that meant. And it led me on a journey to try to understand more about it. Not really the why or the how, but what it meant. And what I found through that, was that music and hearing is empathy. First off, empathy from a standpoint that one of my sons grew up with hearing loss. He had a big chunk of hearing in his right ear, that he couldn't hear. And it was tough for him to learn. But there were other things that I didn't understand at the time. I didn't understand why he could be sensitive to loud noises, or the frequency of certain people's voices, or things like crinkling paper. And there's a lot of things when you have imbalanced hearing that just that are difficult, not only from a processing standpoint but from an emotional standpoint. And I was thrust like firsthand into that situation, and it brought a lot of empathy for understanding like what my son had to go through growing up. And it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry when you lose your hearing. So don't let anybody tell you that it's not. But I learned that empathy. I realized that. And what I realized on a greater standpoint when it comes to music is that music is empathy. Music is the artistic expression, the creative form of empathy. Beyond what we hear, when music is good to us, it's because we feel something. And what we feel is that empathy, that connection, either with the artist or with the audience when you are the artist. So that empathy is a huge part of music. And in losing part of my hearing, I've gained a bigger sense, or it's almost like I hear the empathy in music, and I hear authenticity in more emotion and more feeling. It's a very weird thing, but when I'm playing or when I'm listening to somebody play, that's usually what's coming more, is the feeling and the empathy in the authenticity of somebody's playing, more so than the notes that I'm hearing. It's just been something that has emerged and shifted. But I think it's a really good message, whether you've lost your hearing or whether you've got full hearing, is to understand that there is more to music than just the frequencies that you hear. And that's the big lesson, is that there's more to music than just the sound. And I had done a meditation a little bit before this where I had kind of come to a realization that there's like a wave behind the wave when it comes to music, and that wave is that feeling and that empathy, and the energy behind it. And so losing part of my hearing has opened me up to more of that sense of empathy in music, and the emotion and the feeling behind it. And I realized that I feel music more than I hear it. And I think I've always felt music more than I hear it, on a tangible sense, but on an emotional sense. So that has been one thing that's kind of opened up and has been kind of fun to explore, is that empathy in music. And music is not just sound. I mean, there's a lot of things behind it. The other thing is understanding that, just because there's frequencies that I don't hear doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And the reality is what we hear is only just a small band of the spectrum of what frequencies are out there. There's a whole universe of frequencies that we don't even perceive. And just because we don't perceive it doesn't mean that there's no activity or things going on with that. And it doesn't, it still has an effect somehow in frequencies that we do or can perceive. I mean, whether it's, you can call it magic, or you could call it the things out there. But on the flip side, when I start thinking about that, I think about abundance, and I think about, all of the abundant things in the universe that are out there that I can't see or perceive. I can't taste, feel, hear, smell. I can't perceive any of this abundance, but I know it's out there. And it's just given me a different way of looking at, the perspective of abundance and the things that are out there. So I use little things like this to help change the story behind losing the hearing. And the other thing is, art really is dealing with limitations. I mean, we have 12 chromatic notes in the chromatic scale. We have 12 notes in the scale, but there's a whole lot of frequencies in between there. We just like separated into 12 notes in the temperament. We can go into a long discussion about that. But, what we deal with as artists is always some kind of limitation. And so if I have more limitation because I can't hear part of it, then, I just have more more artistic, things to work with because I'm dealing with more limitations. And so, just thinking a little bit differently about the situation and putting myself into a creative mode of thinking like, okay, what are the greater messages behind losing, part of your hearing, that is it's been part of it. The other thing is on tinnitus, the ringing of the ears. I deal with that a lot, and I think and I've talked to tons of musicians, tons of people who deal with tinnitus, and you can call it tinnitus. I call it tinnitus. In fact, I actually named my tinnitus. I have a musician friend that wrote a song about naming her anxiety, and that was like, that's a good idea. So I'm going to name my tinnitus. I named my tinnitus Bertha after the Grateful Dead song. And one thing that I've realized about tinnitus, and I know that tinnitus, it's not real. It's not a real sound. It's not an actual frequency. It's just your brain putting an overlay because it can't. You're not sensing that frequency, so your brain puts, is amplifying this noise because it's like searching for it, but it's not a real thing. It's something that your perception and your mind is like overlaying on top of it. And what I find is when I'm like deeply absorbed in doing something, and I call it level 4 consciousness, where I'm, not ego, but I am what I am doing, that I don't sense the tinnitus. I don't hear the ringing. But if I'm not mindful and I'm, in a different state, then and then I start focusing on it, then I hear this tinnitus, and it's just it gets like, overwhelming. But I named it Bertha, and so I sang Bertha in my mind, and once I start singing Bertha in my mind, I start going to the chords and, the way they transition and everything, and I get lost, and then the next thing I know, Bertha's gone away, don't come around here no more. And so, that's been something I, in talking to people, is like, how do we deal with tinnitus and this ringing in the ear? I know some people use it to, try to tune, they try to label the frequency and figure out what it is and tune to it. But in my case, I realize that it means that I'm not in a present moment when I'm hearing, the tinnitus. So it's almost a reminder to me to become mindful and present in what I'm doing. And when I do, then it dissipates. And that's a weird thing. So as a musician, in my type of musician, my type of music that I like to do is improvisational music. In the studio here, yep. We get, bring in 4 or 5 different musicians, and we don't necessarily play a song. We just start playing, and then we just flow and creatively flow and go through that. And so playing in a very improvisational stance where you don't necessarily know what the next chord is or what's, you have to, what role somebody is playing. It's all just kind of spur of the moment, free flow, creative as it's going. Not having the full faculty of hearing can be very challenging. The other challenging of it is like, I am now super, super protective of my hearing. I wear earplugs, ear protection, and it's taken me probably about 8 months to figure out a system to actually work to be able to hear what I'm playing or whatever everybody else is playing, but not at a level that hurts my ears. Not just physically, but just from the sensitivity of the hearing. And my hearing is super sensitive at, like, if anything's over 80 dB, it like starts to hurt. So that's a challenge. And in the beginning, when we were jamming, I would be fully plugged up, and to be honest with you, like, hardly hear or decipher anything that was going on. And the amazing thing in doing that is, by being able to feel music, like, there was some really magical, crazy stuff that was able to happen just by being like letting go into that, and not trying to control and just letting it flow. But I have gotten to the point I wear these in-ear monitors, and then I actually put shooting range earmuffs over top of it, and then that way I can really just control the volume of what's in my in-ears, because the in-ears alone don't block enough of the sound for me. So but in doing that, I've figured out, kind of a way to hear everybody, and to do that. But I can't always do that. Like if I'm playing out with somebody, or I don't have the ability to do the in-ears, and I'm wearing earplugs, then it gets to be really challenging. Like how do you hear, like if I'm not hearing a lot of the overtones, or what's going on, or it's difficult to hear my instrument compared to everybody else's, I've had to find some workarounds for that. Definitely being more visual in looking at other players and understanding like where they're playing. And we do a lot of improvisational stuff, so we're not playing strict chords and things like that, so you have to be pretty right on with where somebody is on a fretboard, or keyboard or whatnot. And so just being visual and trying to know what they're playing by seeing it, it takes some time and some development to be able to do that. The other thing is like haptic feedback and being able to like sense. So what I've started to do, I take like a bass and a bass amp, and I play different notes on it, and I feel where it's vibrating kind of within my body. And I know singers kind of do that when they're trying to find their range, is you kind of feel the frequency within your body. And I've been working on that. The challenge is like when you're playing, the bass isn't always hitting the one. Maybe hitting the 3 or the 7 when it's hitting the root or something like that. And so trying to work chord, the feeling of chord, tones, within a haptic standpoint and feeling it. But that has helped, when I'm playing, even in here, if we're going direct on the bass, we'll put the bass through an amp, and it'll vibrate through the floor, and I can feel it, and I've been able to use that to kind of tune a little bit, and I'm still working on that, but that's one thing. And so another thing that I do when I'm playing is I focus on finding space, with my instrument compared to what is being played, and that was a part of my playing anyway before, but it's kind of taken an amplified or an elevated stance in how I play. And so what I mean is, finding like a harmonic and a rhythmic space for my playing in the music. So not playing the same chord position, but if somebody's playing like chords on the lower end of the fretboard, I'll play it higher up, and then I won't play it at the same rhythm. I might intersperse and do some counterpoint or something of that nature, but something to create space, to build space, and within that space find a space. Space is the place, man. To be able to find the space through not only the notes in the octave that you're playing, but also rhythmically, and I focus a lot on rhythm when I'm playing and when I'm soloing. I think a lot about hi-hats, and the crazy thing is I can't hear the hi-hats out of this ear. I hear it out of this one, but if I'm playing something, a lot of times I'm thinking about the hi-hat and what what Zig would do, or what the drummer would do on the hi-hats, and so playing within that helps me create some space. But in creating that space, it helps me differentiate what I'm playing, and be able to hear it in relation to everything. So from a practical standpoint, that's one of the things that I do, and ultimately, I've always had a sense of faith and trust in my playing, and in the muscle memory, and just being able to just let go to the flow and let music flow through me. I've always had the ability to do that, but having some diminished hearing, and the challenges in that, has really like amplified and stepped up that trust and that faith. And I've learned to not judge what I'm playing. Um, I know I'm going to hit wrong notes. I know everybody hits wrong notes, or not that I call it's maybe a wrong note, but it's unintended dissonance. Okay, that unintended dissonance. It's just there, and all it takes is just moving the note up or down or whatnot. And so there's notes that I don't intend to play, but I work them into it. And that doesn't happen too often, because I think by being like trusting and having faith in your playing, that you realize your body knows a lot more than your ears, and that's been a nice thing to realize in the playing, is that I can still play, and I can still have fun, I can still jam and flow, and I can still create, and I can still be part of something amazing. And it's different. It's not worse, it's just different. And I can still hear great things, and I love the things that I can still hear. Am I afraid of losing more hearing? Every once in a while. But I can tell you, this is a journey, and life isn't always about what you accomplish and what you do. It's about the things that you learn and experience along the way. And in that sense, losing part of my hearing has been a gift. And if that was any message I could give to you right now, if you are in that position where you've lost some hearing and you're on an island, you're not on an island. Be happy to talk to you. DM me, give me a message, whatever I could do to help you through this, to help you find your truth and help you find your authenticity. After all, it's the empathy, man. Music is the empathy.